So hi there everybody, I'm absolutely delighted to be here today with Mr. Chris Moss. He has an absolutely stellar CV, a fantastic business background, but tonight we're talking about something quite different, something we're both very passionate about. So without further ado, let me just tell you a little bit about Chris. So Chris describes himself as a business agitator. He is passionate about stirring business leaders to see things differently, such as redefining markets, creating magic moments, or refusing to take no as an answer. A better description would be as an intrapreneur, an in-company entrepreneur. Chris has over time delivered more than Intrapreneurship. He has been an essential ingredient in at least $3 billion companies. He has had a stellar career working alongside Richard Branson and also in telecoms and banking sectors. Chris is the perfect person to be in our hot seat tonight. He doesn't take no for an answer easily. Maybe it's his dyslexia or general stubbornness after struggling at school, but most of the successes have come from moments in his career when others have doubted the idea or plans for growth. Described as mad, dumb, thick and stupid, and a genius by a number of his peers, he puts it down to no more than a few lucky breaks and the dyslexic ability to see things differently. So hi there, Chris. I'm so pleased you're doing this session with me. Thank you so much for giving up a bit of your time today.
It's my pleasure.
We first met a couple of years ago at Casper Craven's event in London, and you were sharing your incredible business story at the time, and you talked about having dyslexia, and that really struck a chord with me, as it was the first time in my life that I had the confidence to call it out and say I was dyslexic too. So since then, it's been an ambition of mine to discuss this in more detail, and we've discussed it in more detail on a number of occasions. So it just seemed that it was the perfect time for me to just drop you an email. Obviously, you're a speaker now in our speaker bureau, the Brand Activators. So in our catch up, we got chatting again, and we just decided that now was the time to talk this through a little bit more. So our ambition is really to help or give some advice or some comfort to other people that are dyslexic. There are 6.3 million people in the UK today with dyslexia. And the more I talk about it, the more I hear of people that are dyslexic, and have sort of been hiding it in their career like I had done, really. So I'd like to tap into your superpower, Chris, because that's what you call it. So over to you, really, just to give us a little bit of an overview of how things happen for you.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I never realised I was dyslexic. It was one of those things that in my day at school, I was just treated as being a little bit thick. Certainly, it was better at the back of the class than the front of the class. And in fact, recently I found some of my school reports, and it was quite interesting reading them. I hadn't realised what pressure my parents felt they were probably under, actually, until you reread them. And one of them was Chris spends a lot of his time in the biggest room in the school, and the room for improvement. And it's something that at the time I thought, well, yeah, okay, maybe it is, but actually I really enjoyed school, and so I would be quite creative and that sort of stuff, but obviously quite disruptive as well, I think, and hated exams, hated being sat down and told you must do this, that and the other. And so I failed miserably, and I just thought I had learning difficulties, really, and that's how it seemed. But actually, it was only when my son got tested when he was at school, and I found that he was dyslexic, that this big box sort of said, oh, well, that's right, that's what it's all about. And actually, it's only when you talk to other people and you discover other dyslexics, you begin to realize that actually it's an amazing gift. And right now, today, where the world is, they're going to scream out for dyslexics, people who can think differently. And so I've been very fortunate, despite my struggle at school, I think.
Yeah, sure. And like you just said there are so many people with dyslexia, and it affects them in different ways. So for instance, I've got a terrible attention span. It's dismal. And I've also got a shockingly poor sense of time. And given that I work in events, that's not great, but I seem to get around it.
But you see, we've started this conversation all around dyslexia, and because people think dyslexic, can't do something, can't write and read or whatever, you're starting off as a negative point, which is, I think, the wrong way around, because quite often, when we start off, as you just said, poor timekeeping, attention span, that sort of stuff. But actually, if you flip it the other way around, say, actually, we need to be stimulated. We get bored easily. And so people who are in jobs that do boring jobs, the same thing day in, day out, probably very happy doing it. But dyslexics aren't. They want a challenge. They want some stimulation. They want to get the grey matter going. And the attention span and the time thing, that's another typical example, because you get interrupted, you think differently. So one idea sparks another idea, sparks another. And actually, rather than being negative, it's positive. And I think that the problem is that quite often people say, oh, well, poor person, they're dyslexic. It's not a negative, it's a positive. Because actually, it's the people who think differently that are going to change the world. And, you approach events in a different way. People don't take you on because you've got a bad attention span or because you're easily distracted. They take you on because you can think your way out of a problem. You can actually see things in a different way. And suddenly you bring the whole place alive because actually you thought of something that somebody else hasn't thought of.
Yeah, I totally agree with the play into the strengths, and it's knowing that that's a strength and not anything to be hindered by.
Yeah, well, it's not just knowing, it's sort of almost to the point of being convinced that actually, if you can get others on your side, you can move mountains. Because so often it is, you do get that, oh no, we can't do that. Well, why not? Well, we've never done it before, and we haven't got the time. Yes, we have got the time. We can make the time. And so it's almost as if dyslexics are really good at breaking down each of the barriers as well. And so often, I don't know. I think I'm quite lucky because I feel positive. There's nothing that really daunts me, and maybe that's because so often in life, when somebody throws something at you, and they think it's a barrier, you find a way around it, or find a way over it, or find a way through it. You just find a way. And in an event, you're putting on a big event, people say, oh, I really want to do this, that, and the other. So let's do it. Not, oh, no, we can't. And dyslexics are very much can-do type people, I think. And that's why right today, it's a great talent to have.
Yeah, I personally, I love a challenge. I love for somebody to say to me, well, I'd like to do this, but I know it can't happen. We won't be able to do that. And to me, that's like a green light to prove people wrong. When you haven't been strong academically, you know that by using your strengths that you can win in other ways. Can you, Chris, give me some thoughts back in your career of times when you've done something that's really turned out pretty magic? I mean, your backstory is incredible anyway, but tell me some things that you'll say, yeah, that was pretty special.
Okay. I don't think they're very special, because I think that, well, anyone could have done that. But I do think there are times when the dyslexia gave me that added strength or whatever. Sometimes that's in imagining the impossible. So many years ago, I worked for a company called Tolman's, who had a Formula One team. We had an offshore powerboat racing team, but we also built a boat capable of going across the Atlantic. And we'd all gone to New York. I was running the project. They'd left New York by boat. We'd flown back, and we got this call to say they'd had a disaster middle of the Atlantic. They had taken on the wrong type of fuel, and one of the fuel tanks they'd filled full of seawater by accident. And this was it. Everyone was saying, oh, well, it's over and done with. And I said, well, no, hang on a minute. Another way around this. It's not over. And they said, well, they've got no more filters. So how do we get filters to them? Well, there's the RAF, and the RAF have Nimrods, and they can locate them, and they can drop things in the ocean. And so somebody said, well, possibly, yeah, but they haven't got any more diesel. Okay, so the Nimrod knows where the ships are. And so just by a process of connecting all these different dots, and quite often dyslexics are really good at taking random pieces of information and you glue them all together, and suddenly there's a picture there. And so we phoned the RAF, and we'd been working with them on dropping some fuel tanks. It was good exercise for them. But before we knew it, they'd located where the boat was. They'd located these fuel filters. We got them to them. They dropped them. The boat carried on, and it was just one of those things where you put random pieces of information together, and suddenly it all becomes very clear. And I've had that so many times. You know, it can be a tiny little product on a plane. How do you get ice creams on an aeroplane? Well, you know, they don't have freezers or fridges. So, well, what else is there? There's other things that keep things cool. Dry ice. What about dry ice? Dry ice is very cold, and maybe we could. And so suddenly we were serving ice creams on the plane that were so cold, so frozen that people couldn't eat them. They had to thaw them out. And so, you know, you find ways around it by maybe looking at another completely different technology or imagining some different way.
Yeah. One story you told me was regarding the Orange brand.
Yeah.
How that came into being. And would you mind sharing that?
No, I'm happy to do that. I mean, I'd been working at Virgin for 8-9 years, and I joined this company called Microtel, and I was desperate because I really wanted to show that when you do brands, it's not just about Branson and Virgin. There are other types of brands, and so I wanted to create something powerful. And a friend of mine had said, "Well, color is the most important thing in people's minds. So if you can have color in your brand, that's good." And I said, "Well, why can't you call it a color?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. You know, what colors are there?" And so we looked at red and yellow and green and orange and this, that. And actually I said, "Well, why not orange?" And nobody else is orange. Vodafone was red, and Cellnet, as it was in those days, was blue and black. 121 was red and blue and black. And so, well, there's this color over here which is nobody's using, and let's call it orange. And then the legal people say, "Oh, I'm sorry, no, you can't register a color." And I said to them, I said, I never said it was a color. You're seeing it's a color, but actually I think it's a fruit. And so we had this big argument for about 10 days as to whether orange was a fruit or a color. And you know, I even had I pretended the logo was round like an orange, and we gave them some logos that had the first letter O was an orange, and they fell for it, and so they went ahead and registered it. But it's funny because sometimes, you know, you can argue head on, or you can just find a nice little back road in. And so we registered orange, personal communication services, not as a color but as a fruit. And in the end, you know, very quickly people felt that it was something different and special, really.
Yeah, I love that. So for me, I've mentioned to you a bit earlier, I left a job for the fear of being found out. I didn't want to lose any reputation. But I've always felt through my career as well that there's been times where I felt more like the Artful Dodger, dodging here and there and swaying and finding out. So how have you found in your time that you've settled into work? Have you been open and open about it? And just
I never knew I was dyslexic until quite late on. So it was never a question that came up. If people asked, what were my university credentials? And there were some people who were saying, "Oh, well, we're looking for people who've got a master's or this, that, and the other." And I had none of that. I didn't go to university. I didn't get any O levels or A levels. And so I sort of struggled, but I actually always seemed to find jobs when I was working with people. So with Branson, I was working for Tolman's, and I was running the boat crossing of the Atlantic and doing lots of promotions and publicity and this, that, and the other. And met Richard and worked with him, and then suddenly he's saying, "Well, why don't you join us?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing the project." And he said, "But what about after the project?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it sounds like an interesting idea. I'd never worked for an airline before." And I said, "But I don't have any airline knowledge." And he said, no, that's great. Don't want anybody who's done it all before, because you do the same old things. And so when you meet the right people, they connect and they understand why you're different and why you have an ability to see things. Branson's a great dyslexic because he connects things. He connects companies, though. I connect people, I connect events, I connect all sorts of different things. I once did a UFO hot air balloon. It was an April Fool, because I love April Fools. It was a great time for creativity. And we built this balloon capable of flying, but it looked like a UFO. But I connected that with a street in Soho that had some flashing lights. The building had a set of flashing lights down the sides. I thought those are quite neat. These little strobe lights all on a row. Found out who made them. found the company. We built this UFO. We put these strobe lights around the outside of it, and we had a little generator in the basket. And you connect one thing and another. And this UFO was a gyroscope I had on my desk one day. I don't know where it came from, but we had all sorts of stuff on my desk. And there was this little plastic UFO that you'd spin, and it would just spin on a little axis thing. And I went to the balloon people. I said, "Can you build me one of those about 250 feet across?" They said, "Yeah, of course we can." And so that and the lights and all these other little bits came together, and suddenly you've got something new and different, really. And it's all part of the fun of it, I think.
And what was the outcome of that story?
Well, it got a little bit complicated because we had to do a flight. So Richard was due to fly with Chris Tarrant actually on April Fool's Day, and we had to do one flight to test it the day before. And we did this flight very, very early morning. We took off from Kenley in Surrey, and the balloon was supposed to do a very short flight, take off, drop down again 20 minutes later, and we have it all packed away before it really got light. And it was supposed to go northeast, and it flew southwest, and it flew straight into the Gatwick handling zone. We'd been talking with Chris Tarrant, so he knew what was going on. So he'd been talking about UFOs all week. He was absolutely fantastic. And they ended up going in completely the wrong direction because the wind changed, straight over the M25. They were so low that all the cars were stationary on the M25. People were out of the cars looking up at this thing because it was coming in and out of the early morning mist and fog. And it did look quite like a UFO. I had a guy come up to him on one of the bridges on the motorway, and I didn't have the heart to tell him, but he was standing there shaking, and he grabbed hold of me and said, "Did you see it? Did you see it? I knew they existed." And I didn't have the heart to tell him it was April the 1st tomorrow, but it ended up being, it was quite one of those defining moments. I got into a lot of trouble. Richard told them it was me that was flying it and all sorts of other things. But anyway, in the end, it was good fun. And I think, that's one of those experiences you have. Quite often, it fires the imagination, I think. And we went on to do all sorts of other things after that as well. Sometimes in business, you have to take a bit of a brave pill. And dyslexia helps me do that because I sort of end up mitigating all of the bad stuff. It's almost as if, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? They can put me in prison. I once inflated a huge gorilla on the roundabout outside of Heathrow when BA were doing all the dirty tricks with Virgin. They were all landing on my desk, and I got fed up. So I ended up asking a friend. He'd got these huge inflatable gorillas. We inflated it on the roundabout just outside BA's head office, and just by the police station. And it had a big T-shirt on, "Stop the monkey business, BA." And the chief of police was not very happy with me. I had a phone call from him reminding me that my pass was about to be revoked and I would never, ever walk on Heathrow's ground again. But what's the worst that can happen? So sometimes you have to think differently to get the point across as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think more and more people need to be thinking differently, especially in times like we're in at the moment. And it's a great time for people to be thinking out the box. And I think we tend to call it disruptive these days, but it's just about it's thinking differently, and it's having the courage, isn't it, to not conform all the time.
You have to be prepared to make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in my career, and you have to make sure that actually you don't do any harm. You don't want to hurt anybody, but at the same time, unless you're pushing a little bit, that I wonder whether it's just another idea. So I think this is a great time for dyslexics, and being brave is a key part of it, I think, but not being afraid to try and do some things a little differently. So often we conform. Oh, well, this is what I was taught to do. And I mean, the thing that everyone asks me is, how can we get away from Google? How can we stop having to use Facebook and just the same old things for their marketing? And actually, it's about thinking differently.
Yeah, it's like how it was back in the day when we were doing promotions all the time.
Exactly. You have to step out of the everyday and actually find some place in people's heads, make them smile, I think. And to be honest, right now, everyone wants a good laugh. I mean, the amount of traffic on WhatsApp of jokes and God knows what else is fantastic. You see the creativity there every single day, and that's the fun of it.
Yeah, we've got some great young entrepreneurs in the Bureau, and they're doing some brilliant stuff to support, you know, the NHS with they're doing pay be as forward, some of the young brewers that we've got in, and you know, some of the stuff they're doing is just being so creative, and they're getting on with it, they're taking action, and they're not waiting to be invited.
No, exactly. And I think that's the whole thing. So often, if you follow the rules, well, we'll wait our turn, or we'll wait for something to happen. But the real entrepreneurs are the ones that seize opportunities, that connect other things together, and so you see it happening every day. It's lovely.
Yeah, brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your advice to somebody that was going through a bit of a tough time, feeling that they were a bit overwhelmed? They, you know, they're dyslexic, and it's maybe pulling against them a little bit in the position that they're in.
It is quite difficult, because it must be so overwhelming for so many people. I always think that so I've been there a number of times in my career when you're doing something and it just isn't going right, or that it's just such a big thing. I always think chopping it up into bite-sized chunks. So being able to deal with something is not trying to deal with it all in one go. Let's deal with this thing today and that thing tomorrow and that thing the next day, and actually working your way through it so that you get the end result. It might take a little longer than trying to have everything firing at one time, but quite often our brains, they get so cluttered with stuff that it's hard to manage it. Whereas actually, let's today do this. Let's for instance, I'm a big fan of postcards. Everyone's at home at the moment. It's lovely to get a postcard from somebody, drop them a line, say hello, and you know, yes, okay, you can go on social, but it's all here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Postcard, you know, wish you were here, or I mean, I've got a little printer. You can buy a pack of plain postcards, send them a funny face, send them a moment you were together. But actually, it's about human connections, and so often in business, it's about making those right moves, really.
Yeah, being memorable.
Yeah, exactly.
Fab. Well, thank you so much. It's been absolutely great catching up and talking to you again.
Lovely pleasure.
And we will keep in touch, and I'll keep you updated of all that we're doing here as well at the Brand Activators. And as anybody will notice, in my branding it's orange, and I wonder who inspired me to get
But it stands out though, isn't it? I mean, that's the whole thing. Yeah, so many people won't, and they wonder why every pound they spend, you know, they don't get £2 back. And you've just got to stand out and be brave, I think. And I think we will see a very different world. The only thing I would say is, in the future, are the values that we're all looking for. I mean, you mentioned about a job earlier on, and you sort of left before you got to it in a way.
Yeah.
I think that we are going to love. We're going to want to love what we do so much more than we've ever done. So many people have been laid off at a moment's notice. So they were living their lives, and suddenly the big company says, "Oh, we're going to follow you." Well, that might be necessary, but actually think about the people involved. And so actually, a lot of people are going to rethink: do they want to work for big companies? Maybe they want to work for themselves. You can make, you know, a lot of money doing different things, really. So.
Yeah, well, for most of my career, I've been self-employed because I almost felt that I was better off that way, because I was in charge of my destiny, my decisions, where I was going to work, who I was going to work with. So I did find it difficult to become an employee for a while. So the drive to get back out and being my own boss was really, really strong. And I'm better doing that. I'm quicker, I'm faster, I'm nimble. I'm not waiting to be told.
I think a lot of businesses are going to struggle to get their employees to come back. Why would you want to be in a corporate environment anymore when that's the way they treat you? So I think we'll see huge number more of entrepreneurs springing up all over the place with quite random ideas and stuff. They've had a chance to think and stop. I mean, in a way, this whole thing is quite tragic, but it's also quite a great opportunity for people to sit and think just for a minute. What do I want out of my life? You know, I've got a little brand I'm doing at the moment, and I'm loving every minute of it. It's called One Life Live It, and we're producing some really nice little leather and silver wristbands and that sort of thing. And it's just given me a chance to say, actually, let's take a breath and figure out what I want to do, really. Good fun.
Yes. So
Lovely
you're
to see you.
still planning. You're still planning and moving on.
Yeah, definitely.
Always.
You got
All
to.
right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, take care.
Lovely to see you.
Yeah.
And see you again soon.
Yeah. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.